The 11:47 p.m. bus to Millbrook had just pulled away from the stop on Cedar Street, leaving Oliver Larsen alone under the flickering fluorescent light. He checked his watch again. He shouldn't have stayed so late at the office, but the Morgan case files weren't going to review themselves. The autumn wind whipped around the glass shelter, carrying the first hints of winter with it. That's when he saw it, a phone lying face down on the metal bench, its black case reflecting the intermittent light above. Oliver glanced up and down the empty street, but there wasn't a soul in sight. He picked up the device, a latest model smartphone, surprisingly heavy in his hand. No case, no scratches, almost new. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing off the surrounding buildings. "Anyone lose their phone?" The screen flickered to life as he turned it over, revealing a battery at 12% and a stark notification, one missed call from a contact labeled simply, "Don't answer." Oliver frowned. In his 10 years as a private investigator, he'd learned that nothing was ever as simple as it seemed, and warning labels usually existed for a reason. He was about to power down the phone when it began to vibrate in his hand. The screen displayed an unknown number, the digits arranged in an unusual pattern he'd never seen before. His thumb hovered over the green answer button as professional curiosity warred with common sense. After 3 rings, curiosity won. "Hello," Oliver said, keeping his voice neutral. "I found this phone at the bus stop on Cedar Street. I'm trying to return it to its owner." There was a long pause filled with what sounded like static, or perhaps heavy breathing. Then a voice spoke, deep, distorted, yet somehow familiar. "Oliver Larsen," it said, making his blood run cold. "You found it. Now it's yours. Run." The line went dead. Oliver stared at the screen, his heart pounding. How did they know his name? He tried to redial the number, but received an error message, "Number not in service." With trembling fingers, he navigated to the phone's settings, looking for any clue to its owner's identity. The device had been wiped clean, no contacts, no messages, no browsing history. Nothing except for a single video file in the gallery, dated yesterday. The thumbnail was black, giving no hint of its contents. His investigator's instincts screamed at him to leave it alone, to turn the phone into the police and wash his hands of the whole thing. But those same instincts had helped him solve cases that others had given up on. With a deep breath, he pressed play. The video began with shaky footage of a dark alley. Whoever was filming was running, their labored breathing providing an ominous soundtrack. The camera swung wildly, catching glimpses of brick walls and overflowing dumpsters. Then it steadied, turning to face the person holding it. Oliver nearly dropped the phone. The face on the screen was his own. But that was impossible. He had never been in that alley, had never recorded this video. The Oliver in the footage looked terrified, his face illuminated by the phone's light. His mouth moved, forming words that the video's audio didn't capture. The screen suddenly went black, then lit up with another incoming call. The contact name made his stomach lurch, "Don't answer." His finger trembled over the screen. Every instinct told him not to answer, but he needed answers. He accepted the call. "Look behind you," the voice whispered. Oliver spun around, heart hammering against his ribs. Through the scratched glass of the bus shelter, he saw a tall figure in a dark coat standing motionless across the street. The figure's face was hidden in shadow, but Oliver could feel its gaze fixed on him. He ran. The streets of downtown Cedar Rapids were almost empty at this hour, his footsteps echoing off the buildings as he sprinted past closed storefronts and darkened offices. The phone buzzed again in his hand, another call, but he didn't dare look at it. He could hear footsteps behind him, matching his pace. 3 blocks from his apartment, he ducked into Riverside Alley, a shortcut he discovered during a surveillance job last year. The narrow passage between 2 brick buildings was pitch black, but he knew it well enough to navigate by memory. Halfway through, he pressed himself against the cold wall, trying to slow his breathing. The footsteps stopped. Oliver held his breath, straining to hear any movement. The phone's screen cast a faint blue glow that he quickly covered with his hand. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then his own voice spoke from the darkness ahead of him, "You shouldn't have answered." The phone rang again, vibrating against his palm. In the brief flash of light from its screen, he caught a glimpse of something moving at the far end of the alley. The caller ID read, "Last warning." With shaking hands, he accepted the call. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What do you want?" "Check your email," the voice said, clearer now. Case number 47 to 839. "You were wrong about Morgan." Oliver's blood ran cold. The Morgan case, his current investigation, involving the disappearance of local business owner James Morgan 3 weeks ago. The police had written it off as another middle-aged man walking away from his life, but Morgan's wife insisted there was more to it. Oliver had spent weeks digging, uncovering a pattern of suspicious financial transactions and late-night meetings. "What about Morgan?" Oliver asked, but the line was already dead. He forced himself to think like an investigator rather than a scared man in a dark alley. The phone, high-end but not personalized, clearly purchased for a specific purpose. The video, impossible but undeniably real. The voice that knew too much about his cases. A flash of memory hit him. Last week, while reviewing security footage from Morgan's office, he'd noticed something in the background. A figure in a dark coat, standing motionless across the street, watching. He dismissed it as irrelevant at the time. The phone buzzed with a text message, "Your office. Now. Bring the phone." Oliver knew his office would be empty at this hour. He'd been the last to leave, as usual. Going there would be foolish, possibly dangerous. But if this was connected to the Morgan case? He'd built his career on following leads others missed. On trusting his instincts even when they led him into darkness. And right now, those instincts were screaming that everything, the phone, the video, the figure in the coat, was somehow connected to what had really happened to James Morgan. The phone buzzed again. "Time is running out. For both of us." Oliver pushed himself away from the wall, his decision made. He'd take the long way to his office, sticking to well-lit streets. First, he needed to stop at his apartment and grab his gun from the safe. Whatever game this was, he wasn't going to play it unarmed. As he emerged from the alley, the streetlight above him flickered and died. In the sudden darkness, he heard footsteps again, this time coming from all directions. Oliver broke into a run, no longer caring about stealth. He reached his apartment building in minutes, fumbling with his keys at the entrance. The lobby was dark, the lights should have been on. Mrs. Henderson, the night desk attendant, was nowhere to be seen. The elevator doors opened as soon as he pressed the button, as if waiting for him. He took the stairs instead, taking them 2 at a time to the 4th floor. His apartment door was exactly as he'd left it, security system light blinking green. He disabled it with trembling fingers and stepped inside. Something was wrong. The air felt different, cooler, disturbed. His gun safe was in the bedroom, but as he moved through the dark apartment, he noticed small things out of place. His laptop was closed, he always left it open. The coffee mug on his desk had been moved 2 inches to the left. Someone had been here. The phone buzzed again. He nearly dropped it in surprise. "Open your laptop," the message read. Password, Morgan 478392. Oliver stared at the screen. That wasn't his password. But as he looked at his laptop, he noticed a post-it note stuck to its surface that hadn't been there before. Written in his own handwriting were the words, "Trust yourself." He opened the laptop. The password worked. A video file began playing automatically. Security footage from what looked like a parking garage, dated 3 weeks ago, the night James Morgan disappeared. Oliver recognized the location, the underground parking at Morgan's office building. He'd reviewed this footage a dozen times, finding nothing suspicious. But now he saw it. Morgan walking to his car at 11:42 p.m., briefcase in hand. The same dark figure from the bus stop, stepping out from behind a pillar. A conversation, no audio, but clearly heated. Morgan getting into the passenger seat of his own car. The figure driving away. How had he missed this? The footage continued, showing the car returning an hour later. The figure got out alone, walked to the security camera, and looked directly into it. Oliver's own face stared back at him. The video ended, replaced by a document, case notes in his own handwriting that he had no memory of writing. James Morgan discovered irregularities in company finances, the notes read. Traced them to offshore accounts. Found evidence of money laundering through his own business. Threatened to go public. Had to be stopped. Used his own phone to lure him. Simple, clean. No one looks too closely at another man walking away from his life. Except his wife. Except me. The phone rang again. Don't answer, flashed on the screen. Oliver answered anyway. You're starting to remember, aren't you? His own voice asked. Check your coat pocket. The left one. The one you never use. With mounting dread, Oliver reached into his left coat pocket. His fingers closed around something cold and metallic. He pulled out a key, new, recently cut. Attached was a tag with an address he recognized, Morgan's office building. No, he whispered. This isn't possible. Look at your hands, the voice said. Oliver looked down. In the laptop's blue glow, he saw faint bruises on his knuckles that hadn't been there before. Under his fingernails, was that blood? What did I do? He asked, his voice cracking. Not you, the voice replied. Not yet. But you will. Tonight. Unless we stop it. Stop what? The loop. It's happened 6 times already. You find the phone. You follow the clues. You discover the truth. And then you become me, the you that's trying to fix it. But it never works. Something always goes wrong. This time has to be different. The laptop screen flickered, showing a new video. Oliver watched himself recording a message, looking desperate and exhausted. If you're watching this, you're me, 3 weeks ago, the recorded Oliver said. Before Morgan. Before the phone. Before everything went wrong. You think you're investigating a missing person case, but you're actually trying to prevent a murder. Your murder. Our murder. The one we commit to try to make things right. The recorded message continued, growing more urgent. You need to understand, Morgan found something he wasn't supposed to find. Not just money laundering. Something bigger. They used his company, his reputation, but it goes deeper. Government contracts. Missing persons cases going back decades. A pattern no one was meant to notice. Oliver's head spun. He'd seen the financial discrepancies in Morgan's company records, but he'd assumed it was typical corporate fraud. Looking back, he remembered odd details that hadn't quite fit, unexplained absences of key employees, redacted sections in personnel files, and security protocols far too stringent for a mid-sized manufacturing firm. The phone is the key, his recorded self explained. It's how they contact their targets. How they monitored Morgan. How they're monitoring us now. But I found a way to intercept it, to use their own system against them. Each loop, I get closer to understanding how it all works. But I also get closer to becoming what I'm trying to stop. The laptop screen suddenly filled with dozens of images, surveillance photos spanning months. Oliver recognized himself in all of them, but the timestamps made no sense. Him watching Morgan's office in July, when he hadn't taken the case until September. Him following Morgan's wife in August, when he'd never tailed her at all. Him standing in that dark coat across from the bus stop, just hours ago. The phone chimed with a new message, garage level B3. 20 minutes. Bring everything. Oliver's desk drawer opened with a soft click, though he hadn't touched it. Inside lay a manila envelope he'd never seen before. The label read, "Evidence, do not open," in his own handwriting, the ink still fresh. Inside were more photos, more documents. A pattern emerged, 7 different versions of the same 3 weeks, each ending with Morgan's disappearance. Each time, Oliver had gotten closer to the truth, only to become trapped in the same role, the mysterious figure in the coat, trying to warn his past self. But this set of photos showed something new. A face he recognized from Morgan's company files, Dr. Sarah Chen, head of their R&D department. In every version of events, she appeared in the background, watching. And in each loop, she disappeared shortly after Morgan did. The laptop lit up with another video file. Security footage from Morgan's company, showing Dr. Chen in her lab late one night. She was arguing with someone off-camera, gesturing at complex equations on a whiteboard. The equations looked like advanced physics, far beyond anything a manufacturing company should need. The timestamp showed this was 2 days before Morgan vanished. Oliver's phone, his real phone, not the found one, buzzed in his back pocket. A text from an unknown number, "She's still alive. This time, we can save them both." The mystery phone rang again. The caller ID showed a new message, "Choose wisely." 2 voices spoke simultaneously when he answered, his own, and another he didn't recognize. A woman's voice, desperate and clear, "Don't trust what you remember. Trust what you wrote." The line went dead. Both phones died simultaneously, their screens going black. In the sudden darkness, Oliver heard his laptop fan whir to life, though the screen remained dark. A command prompt appeared, green text on black. Iteration 7 failed. Paradox detected. Initiating emergency protocol. Time remaining, 17 minutes. The desk drawer clicked again. This time, when Oliver opened it, he found a gun he didn't recognize, loaded with strange, iridescent bullets. Taped to its grip was a note in Dr. Chen's handwriting, "Quantum entanglement can't be broken. But it can be redirected." Oliver stared at the gun, his investigator's mind racing to connect the pieces. Quantum entanglement, he'd seen that term in one of Morgan's redacted files. Dr. Chen's research wasn't about manufacturing at all. They were experimenting with something else, something that could explain the impossible events of the past few hours. The laptop screen flickered again, showing a series of emails between Morgan and Dr. Chen. "The containment field is unstable. If they rush the tests, we risk creating temporal anomalies. Chen. They're not giving us a choice anymore. We need to go public. Morgan. It's worse than we thought. The field isn't just unstable, it's already affecting things. Time isn't linear here anymore. Chen. I'm calling the oversight committee tomorrow. Whatever happens to me, make sure this gets out." Morgan's last email. A new message appeared on the mystery phone's screen, even though it was supposedly dead, B3 level cameras offline. Security patrol diverted. 12 minutes remaining. Oliver grabbed the gun and both phones, his decision made. The pieces were falling into place. Morgan's company wasn't just laundering money, they were a front for something bigger. The mysterious government contracts, the excessive security, Dr. Chen's advanced research. They'd somehow created technology that affected time itself, and Morgan had threatened to expose it all. But something had gone wrong. The technology had created a loop, trapping Oliver, Morgan, and Dr. Chen in an endless cycle of discovery and disappearance. Each iteration, a version of Oliver had tried to prevent it, only to become part of the very mystery he was trying to solve. The elevator in his building's lobby was still waiting, doors open. This time, Oliver stepped inside. As it descended past the ground floor toward the parking levels, he noticed something odd about his reflection in the polished doors. It moved a fraction of a second after he did. The elevator stopped at B3. The doors opened to reveal a familiar scene from the security footage he'd watched earlier, Morgan's car, parked in the same spot. But this time, Oliver knew what was about to happen. He checked his watch, 11:39 p.m. 3 minutes before Morgan would arrive in the original timeline. A figure stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, another Oliver, wearing the dark coat. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither moved. "You got my messages," the other Oliver said. "Good. We don't have much time. Where's Dr. Chen?" "Lab level, 2 floors down. She's trying to shut down the containment field, but they're already on their way. In every other loop, this is where it all goes wrong. Morgan arrives, we try to warn him, and we become the very thing we're trying to prevent," Oliver finished. The other Oliver nodded. "The field creates temporal duplicates when it's unstable. Each copy thinks it's the original, trying to fix the timeline. But we can't fix it, we can only change who gets caught in the loop." Footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Morgan was early. "What happens if we break the loop?" Oliver asked. "According to Dr. Chen's calculations, only one version of events can survive. One version of us." The other Oliver raised a gun identical to the one in Oliver's hand. "That's why it never worked before. We always tried to save everyone." The elevator pinged behind them. Dr. Chen stepped out, looking exactly as she did in her company photo, but exhausted, desperate. "Don't listen to him," she said to Oliver. "That's not you from another loop, it's their failsafe. A quantum copy they created to maintain the timeline if anything went wrong. To make sure the truth never gets out." The mystery phone in Oliver's pocket began to vibrate, not a call this time, but a steady pulse that seemed to match his heartbeat. The air in the garage grew heavy, like the moment before a thunderstorm. His reflection in the car windows started to blur, showing multiple versions of himself overlapping. "She's lying," the other Oliver said, his gun unwavering. "Think about it. How did you get all those messages? Who knew exactly where to leave the phone for you to find?" "The phone," Oliver said slowly. "It's not just a phone, is it? It's connected to whatever you were researching here." Dr. Chen took a step forward. "It's a quantum receiver. We designed it to communicate across temporal variations, but they weaponized it. Used it to identify and eliminate potential whistleblowers before they could ever come forward. Different timelines, different choices, same outcome." A security door slammed somewhere below them. Morgan's voice echoed up the stairwell, arguing with someone. "1 minute," the other Oliver said. "When Morgan comes through that door, everything changes. In every timeline, he dies. Or disappears. Or becomes something else. And we spend the next 3 weeks trying to fix it, becoming the very thing we're fighting against." Oliver looked at the gun in his hand, the strange bullets glowing faintly in the dim garage light. "What do these rounds do?" "Quantum entangled tracers," Dr. Chen explained quickly. "They can sever the connection between temporal duplicates, collapse the uncertainty into a single timeline. But we never got them to work properly. The test subjects, the damage spread across all their variants." The mystery phone's vibration intensified. Text appeared on its screen, "Divergence point approaching. Choose." Morgan's footsteps grew closer. Oliver could hear multiple sets now, slightly out of sync, like an echo that came before the sound. "If you're really me," Oliver said to his duplicate, "then you know what happens next. Tell me how this ends." The other Oliver's face showed a flicker of uncertainty. I don't remember. Each loop overwrites the last. I only know what I wrote down, what I left for myself to find." "Exactly," Dr. Chen said. "Because you're not a time traveler. You're a quantum construct, built from probability and memory. The perfect cleaner, a version of the investigator who would always choose to cover up the truth." The stairwell door began to open. Oliver saw multiple versions of the handle turning, each at a slightly different angle. The mystery phone's screen flashed. Temporal convergence in 5, 4, 3. Last chance, the other Oliver said. You can end this. Become me. Keep the loop stable. Or watch everything collapse. Oliver raised his gun, the quantum rounds casting strange shadows on the garage walls. You're right. I can end this. He turned and fired, not at his duplicate, not at Morgan's approaching footsteps, but at the mystery phone itself. The bullet struck the screen with a sound like shattering glass and stretching metal. Reality seemed to flex around the impact point. Oliver saw dozens of versions of himself reflected in the fragmenting screen, some pointing their guns at Morgan, some at Dr. Chen, some at themselves. Timelines collapsing, possibilities converging. The other Oliver lunged forward, his form becoming transparent, unstable. What have you done? The garage filled with a high-pitched whine as reality tried to reconcile itself. Oliver saw Dr. Chen moving in slow motion, her mouth forming words he couldn't hear. The other Oliver's form flickered like a bad transmission, his edges blurring into the air around him. Then everything stopped. In the sudden silence, Oliver heard a single set of footsteps. James Morgan stepped through the stairwell door, just one version of him now, solid and real. He carried his briefcase and a familiar phone. I remember, Morgan said, looking at the frozen tableau before him. Every version, every loop. They're all still there, but distant. Like a dream you know you had but can't quite recall. Dr. Chen unfroze, gasping as if surfacing from deep water. The quantum entanglement is collapsing. All possible timelines are resolving into one. She looked at her tablet, its screen filled with cascading equations. But without the containment field, we can't control which version becomes real. The other Oliver made a sound like static, his form increasingly transparent. We were so close. The perfect system. Control time, control everything. That's why it never worked, Oliver said, understanding finally clicking into place. You can't control time. You can only choose what to do with the time you have. The mystery phone's shattered screen displayed one final message. Timeline consolidated. Paradox resolved. Iteration final. Morgan set his briefcase on the hood of his car and opened it. Inside were files, hundreds of them, documenting everything. The experiments, the missing persons, the cover-ups. I made copies, he said. Every night, in every timeline. Somewhere, some version of me had to succeed. The other Oliver reached for the briefcase, but his hand passed through it. His form was almost gone now, visible only as a slight distortion in the air. You don't understand what you've done. What's coming? Maybe not, Oliver said. But whatever it is, we'll face it in this timeline. The real one. The garage lights flickered, then stabilized. When they came back to full brightness, the other Oliver was gone. Dr. Chen's tablet showed normal readings. The quantum rounds in Oliver's gun had turned to ordinary bullets. Only the mystery phone remained, its screen cracked but still showing one last text. Case closed. For now. 3 days later, the story broke. Morgan's evidence exposed it all, the secret research, the disappeared whistleblowers, the attempt to weaponize time itself. Investigations were opened, arrests were made, and Dr. Chen's research was shut down. But some questions remained unanswered. The identity of the group behind it all. The fate of the other timelines. And sometimes, late at night, Oliver's phone still shows strange messages from numbers that don't exist. He doesn't answer them anymore. But he keeps them, along with the broken mystery phone, in a locked drawer in his office. Just in case. Because as any good investigator knows, no case is ever truly closed. Time, after all, has a way of revealing new mysteries. And somewhere, in some other possibility, another phone is ringing.